Thanks for joining me today, Chris. I always like to start off our interviews by introducing you to our audience. Chris Weiser is the CEO of the Weiser Agency, a marketing and sales consulting agency whose mission is to help entrepreneurs build their businesses through systems and processes for a profitable exit. His agency has a special focus on educating information technology and cybersecurity managed service providers create inbound leads through social media advertising. Chris has extensive experience with MSPs as the former CEO of Tech Squad AT, an MSP firm that was based out of the greater Milwaukee area. He was the CEO of that organization for 10 years prior to him selling the company in 2015. Chris was also featured in a full-length documentary in 2013 that was produced and directed by Nick Nanton titled The IT Guy. The documentary shared Chris's unique way of working with his clients and how he helps them solve their corporate issues. While owners who worked with him in the past have been quoted saying, his way may not be the easiest way or the cheapest way, but it's always the right way. Welcome, Chris.
Hey, what's up, man? How are you doing, sir?
Doing great, doing great. So I guess we'll just hop right into it. So Chris, in the introduction, the quote I just mentioned there was with someone while you worked in Milwaukee. Can you elaborate on what he meant by that? What steps do you take when you are working with your clients to ensure that your way is the right way?
Sure. So this is actually, in my coaching organization, this is something that we found to be a pretty big problem among IT, and maybe it's a human problem, I don't know, but specifically what I've seen is it's definitely an IT guy problem, to where they're oftentimes afraid to give the bad news to the prospect. They're oftentimes afraid to deal with money adversity or any of these types of issues. So oftentimes they will take the path of least resistance versus the right path. And you think about this when, let's just role play a little bit. Let's say you and I are going to go to the doctor. When you go to the doctor, you don't want the path of least resistance. You want the right path, right? So, because you're going to an expert to get that expert opinion. And sometimes it's not the easiest. Sometimes it's not the most fun, right? Maybe sometimes it's not the cheapest, but it should way. Well, that's what I try to do as an IT professional, and that's what I instilled in my clients, and that's what I try and instill in my coaching clients now, is that it should be the way that the expert professional drives you. May not be the cheapest, may not be the easiest, but it's going to be the proper path. And that path may also move over time. That's also a big factor. Think about how that, you're sitting here in mid-2019 right now. Let's rewind a year and look at how the cybersecurity landscape has a year. So that path is going to evolve over time, which shows that you need to be consistently meeting with your clients. You need to be putting these things in front of them. You need to be having those strategic discussions versus just, oh, I'm going to leave them on the agreement they were on before. I'm never going to change that. Set it and forget it. So that's that's basically what he meant. And that guy was actually, she was a general manager at a large lumber firm, which ended up being my largest client when I sold the company. Largest client, and rarely, and they were very price averse in the beginning, and they slowly moved with my gentle nudgings. They slowly moved towards, okay, we're going to take Chris's recommendations, because oftentimes I gave them the why behind it.
Right. And that analogy you had with the doctor makes a lot of sense, because you don't want to cheap out on any treatment. So why business that way too? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and there's a lot of times the recommendation I use to my clients, my coaching clients now, is what's the budget limitation on I have a child with cancer? Right. They don't get 3 cheapest quotes. There's no budget, right? It's whatever it takes, fix the problem. And that's how you kind of have to relay things to your clients too. And it's up to you to put these things in place, so to show them that path and the why.
Right. And then to some folks, the part of that quote that may stick out to them the most and maybe be a little bit apprehensive is that your way may not be the cheapest way. Obviously, everyone's really budget conscious here. So this interview is really centered about how to sell cybersecurity. And on your LinkedIn profile and website, you mentioned the importance of marketing, social media advertising, SEO, content. And each of these segments requires not only a large time investment, but they may also require monetary investment as well. To those organizations who are apprehensive about investing in marketing for their cybersecurity organization, how do you convince them that all of their investment is?
Well, I think the biggest is they have to be invested to execute, not even barely invested. They have to that executive, that decision maker, has to be invested to execute. There's some old quotes that are out there that says the fish rots from the head down. And you think about how relevant that is in business. A lot of times a company takes the takes on the whole culture mindset of its executive, of its top executive or its CEO or owner or whatever you want to call them. So it's so important that, number one, that executive, that head person, male, female, whoever they are, has to fully be believing that they are building a sales organization. That is a critical piece. I have multiple people that I work with right now where the CEO isn't invested, and they continue to see struggles. It happens because they are just not all invested into it. So that's thing number one. That's what I would recommend, is make sure that top executive, and if that's you that's watching, I understand that you're tech. I get it. I was tech. I started out as engineer guy. But here's, and I have this literally on the top banner on my YouTube channel. You can solve any problem with cash flow, period. We can do that. So you have to believe that I understand tech. You have to move yourself and migrate yourself to a sales and lead generation centric leader, really, is where you have to go. So number one is you have to be invested mentally, and that has to go along with it. Number two, along with all the different things that we're talking about here, you have to make sure, from a monetary investment side, I would recommend doing multiple different pieces, but the biggest piece is investing with lead generation and actual appointment booking systems before you invest in sales closing staff. That's probably important, because in the beginning, I'll just take my current organization. In the beginning, as I started it, I was the lead generator, but I was also the solo closer. Well, as I built more lead generation systems up, I started to max out my personal pipeline. And that's what's key, is I maxed out my personal closing pipeline. Then I can hand that closing off to another closer versus, and learning how to do those lead generation strategies is probably the most important thing. And that's where you should invest your money first. So making sure you're doing lead generation strategies, sure you're actually having systems and processes that are replicable. And then you can actually drive those leads to a closer. And what most MSPs make a mistake on is they try and hire a salesperson, expect them to just generate all the leads, and then close them at the same time. Like it's not that easy to do. It's not like other businesses where the leads are just walking in the door. There has to be prospecting and nurturing and other pieces that go along with it. So that's, it's kind of a long round way around that question, but that's a really important piece of it.
Right. And of course, I can certainly appreciate everything that's involved with and required from a marketing standpoint as well, given my role here at Etactics. But there's a lot of strategizing that goes into it, as you kind of just mentioned, especially if you want it to be done correctly. So what's your strategy for marketing cybersecurity? Does the strategy change based on the MSP that you're working with?
And there's a couple different factors. One of the things that we started out with initially is most MSPs, like I'd say 98% of the MSPs that we work with have existing clients. They have a pretty decent sized existing client base. They've not touched that existing client base. So we focus on helping them to push that in. We have a QBR process, a quarterly business review process that we give them, complete with templates and documents and all these, along with a full stack of cybersecurity. Etactics happens to be one of those tools that we use and recommend. Thanks, guys, by the way. And we push them to go to that existing client base first, because remember, we can solve any problem with cash flow. We get cash in the door right away. That's good. So that's hitting some of our low-hanging fruit and getting cash right away. Then we start to evolve and educate. And you think back 5 to 10 years in all of our marketing organizations, the number one lead generation strategy that most business B2B firms used was direct mail. They use direct mail a lot. Well, direct mail is getting harder and harder to do with response rates now below 1%. So we're utilizing a lot of social strategy. We're utilizing a lot of cold strategy. So we're utilizing cold email, cold LinkedIn, cold calling. All three of those we're using. And then as we get leads into the pipeline, we are nurturing not only with email, but with social posts on LinkedIn and Facebook. And yes, folks, your clients are on Facebook. I know all of you are, for the most part, think that, oh, my clients aren't on Facebook. They're there. You're just not talking to them. I built my entire, and Matt, I believe my large Facebook group for IT professionals, I get 98% of my clients, B2B, on Facebook. And the other 2% come basically, I spend very little money on trade shows, which are super, super expensive to do. Spend very little money on that, and we target that directly. So we're doing a lot of actual reach out. Cold calling is still very popular. We do that internally. We do cold email. We do cold LinkedIn, like I said, and then we nurture them down and then provide constant surrounding of various different strategies, so they're always seeing us. And the factor is now, there's no better time to be an MSP. Honestly, people are terrified of it, but the bottom line is it's going to do two things. It's going to weed out the crap, like it's kind of that natural selection kind of thing. It's going to get rid of all the crappy MSPs that are getting, you know, we're running into these almost every day now, to where an MSP is getting breached and then their clients are getting attacked. It's going to weed out all those crappy guys, and it's making us more relevant, making the MSP more relevant than we've ever been, because never have we had a scenario where we could walk into a 500-person firm and offer cybersecurity services, and they can't do it internally. Think about that. Like they would have to hire a massive staff to do that internally, while we as MSPs and MSSPs can do all of that now. So there's opportunities out there, but it all comes back to that one thing I started with a couple minutes ago, that execution factor.
Right. And you there, so it continues. I mean, as you and I know, it continues to grow in popularity every day. And in a recent study by Smart Insights, actually, it stated that the number of social media users worldwide is up 9% from 2018. And although that's great from a potential standpoint, it also means that there's an increase in the saturation of content that's shared on each platform. So this in turn makes it harder for those companies to get noticed organically by their target demographic. So from a content perspective, what are some cybersecurity marketing trends you're seeing that MSPs can take advantage of right now to instantly increase their social media presence?
So a couple things with that. Most MSPs aren't doing that. So while they're seeing an increase of saturation of overall content, MSPs that are doing, unless they're my clients, honestly, but unless they're seeing, and almost nobody is doing this in the MSP landscape. So you can educate your clients a lot, and I would talk to them more often than not. I would educate them 99% of the time. When they have a problem, they'll come to you. If they know that you exist, but you need to be educating them, and you need to be selling, not products, not services, but selling to the pains you solve. So sell to the pain you solve. That is a factor. Solve a pain, give a solution, and educate on that. Don't worry about the sales part, because they're going to get breached. Like, we know that's going to happen. Like, we know without question, everybody that's out there is going to get hit sooner than later. So you need to make sure that you're top of mind. Video is key. Oh, but Chris, I'm not good on video. You get better over time. I'm decent on video now. Matt, you're good on video. Like, we didn't just wake up one day and be like, oh, we're good on video. It takes practice. It takes time. It takes consistently doing this. You can't be terrified of it. And if you're not pushing yourself to be uncomfortable in your business, you're never going to grow, period.
Right.
You know, I use a lot of analogies when I talk, and you think about, I know we used the doctor one a few minutes ago. Let's think about the personal trainer one now. When we go out to do a brand new workout, let's say we haven't worked out for 3 months, and we go work out. What's the next day? What's the second day like? It's the most uncomfortable, miserable thing ever, because you are sore, you can barely walk, right? That's how this has got to be. Like, you have to push yourself to the uncomfort level of, you're like, yeah, I don't know what to do. And really push yourself to those places that you've never been, and then you can get in front of people. But video is a really, you should have a YouTube channel. You should have a YouTube channel with tons of how-to on it. All those things are out there. You should, and then as people watch that, you should probably have YouTube ads. You should have Facebook ads. You should have LinkedIn ads. You should have all these things surrounding them. And we teach how to do that in my coaching environment. But you think about how much of a differentiation that is from everybody else in the IT industry, because nobody's doing any of this social stuff. Very few are doing video.
Right. Yeah, and they always say, you know, if you don't change anything, nothing's going to change. So I mean, that definitely hits the nail on the head.
Yep, absolutely.
So after an MSP or one of your clients starts implementing your strategies on social media, how long does it take before they start to generate a lot of traction? And then what are your recommendations for tracking those results?
Yeah, so a couple pieces. Number one, one of the reasons we go after the QBRs first and try and push cybersecurity on existing clients first is because, like I said, low-hanging fruit, really quick reactions. We have a client that's been with us literally like just 60 days right now. I think 60 days, like 2 days from now. He added 20,000 of recurring in his first 60 days. In his first 45 days, he added 20,000 in recurring by using that process, going back to existing clients, pitching cybersecurity. Again, we taught him what to do. He didn't even touch cybersecurity 60 days ago. And now he's generated 20,000 in recurring on 36-month agreements. So it's his business, just by giving him, and remember I said, cash flow solves every problem, right? You can solve every problem with cash flow. Now he has the ability to go hire multiple marketing avenues because he's got that immediate cash influx. So So, those kind of things you can see response on really, really quickly. Now, traditional marketing takes long time execution. It takes a long time, and what I call consistency and persistency. Like those two things are really key. Anywhere from 30 to 180 days. That's 1 month to 6 months it takes traction. But
right.
If you consistently execute, back to the working out thing. If I work out one day, no difference. If I work out for 6 months straight, I'll tell you what, if you and I challenge each other and we work out every day and eat right for the next 6 months, what are we going to look like? We know the answer. Like we know the answer. How many people actually do it? That's a whole other animal. It's the same thing with marketing your MSP. How many people actually do those things? Very, very few. So anywhere from 30 to 180 days, 1 month to 6 months, to see, and you're going to see some stuff right away. But what's also going to happen is if you don't master that strategy and start to delegate that execution, you're going to see this slow drop off of your activities, because it's hard to do consistently. So you have to make sure that you bring in team members. You have to make sure you build process and build services and outsource those things. And insight, I'd actually recommend everything. That's what I do internally. That's what I did with my MSP. I would recommend you do that across the board, but anywhere from 1 to 6 months.
Okay. All right. Yeah. And I mean, obviously, since we're going to stay on the social media topic here, and we did kind of mention advertising previously, but I mean, everyone says they're so busy, right? So adding Facebook ads or other pay-per-click campaigns to their plate might seem like it's a really daunting task. But what are your recommendations for a cybersecurity MSP who's just now starting to venture into the social media and online paid advertising space? Are there any classes or certifications you recommend that they take?
Classes are tough because this stuff is constantly changing these days. And that's the biggest factor. The one thing that we all have in common is that we are all mostly self-taught. I'm going to say, like, almost everybody I have, think about the MSP industry as a whole. Think about yourselves that are watching this. How many of us went to a class or a 4-year college course and then popped out an MSP? Almost nobody. I don't think that's not a real thing. So we're all self-taught, self-learning people. Immerse yourself in the technology. None of it's like mind-bending. It's way harder to set up a Windows 2016 server or a firewall than it is to do any of this stuff. You have to be willing to take the risk and immerse yourself in it. Work on it. Like, we're all self-learning. So that would be my number one path. YouTube has a massive amount of stuff on it. I do train all of the stuff, and we have courses. Like, I have a Facebook ads for beginners course. I have a Linked Academy course. We have a brand new YouTube ads for IT coming out. That's a course that's coming out in fourth quarter. All this stuff is out there, and it's things that are in front of people. But the bottom line is, if you don't make a plan and execute it, and immersion in the technology and the software, none of it's hard, but immersion into it is probably your biggest steps. Figure it out yourself, master that strategy, get it, master then delegate it, and surround yourself with sales thinking people. That's the biggest thing that my coaching is different from. We're not a marketing implementation firm. We don't just hand you leads. We teach you how to fish. Period. So we're going to teach you how to do these things, walking through the things that I'm doing real time. Like, we had a coaching call yesterday morning, and we walked through a brand new IT and MSP cold email campaign that we set up and tested and seeing results for one of our clients. It's pretty cool stuff.
Right. That's awesome. So let's say they just pay their dues and are at that point where they started to generate some consistent stream of inbound leads.
Yep.
At this point, I mean, you could probably consider they're in the space. So how can this MSP leverage their status and, more importantly, continue to grow their audience?
So I'd say, the most important thing to do in that scenario, what are you and I doing right now? I'm private speaking,
right.
But and did I call you? Nope, you called me, right? So as you start to become an influencer in that community, that's what happens. You get yourself out the video, you get comfortable with it, people start to see your face, they start to recognize your name, and they start to see, oh, this person is somewhat of an influencer in the space. They will come to you. Now, in the early stages, and I will tell you this, in 20, I had 3 speaking gigs. I had to, I don't want to say beg, but I had to basically ask. I had to very much ask if I could come speak and promise not to sell and all this other stuff. In 2019, I have 27 speaking gigs, and 3/4 of them I'm being paid to do. It's all because of and that just shows you, like, if you never get initial starting blocks and never, like, in the beginning, I was straight out asking. I was in a lot of what vendors do. If you guys notice this, when you go to the MSP vendor shows, Datto Nation or Kaseya Connect or some of these bigger ones, you'll notice that all these vendors are speaking. Well, they're usually paying to be on stage. They're paying 10 or 15 or 30 or 40 or $100,000 to be on stage for whatever those keynotes are. As you start to move up that echelon, especially as you, and a couple little golden nuggets I'll give you guys that are watching, target associations in your communities, talk about, send them messages, like cold messages, and say, hey, I am a cybersecurity expert. I'd like to speak to your organization about how to hack-proof their business. That's a great script right there. Like, boom, like, see how that just came right off the head. Target those associations, like professional insurance associations. We used to do the IT for the Professional Insurance Agents Association in Wisconsin. I was in Milwaukee with my MSP. I spoke to the user convention multiple times. Wisconsin State Bar Association, we talked to their people. So emails, send them emails. What's the worst thing that happened? Big deal, right? That's, who cares? So get out there and ask, but public speaking is going to be your next best thing. And then what eventually happens is the media starts to take note. One of the reasons I got booked on that documentary you talked about was, it was in Milwaukee. I was known as the IT guy at all the news stations. So I go all the way back to like 2013, 2014. Do you remember when the Target breach happened? There was that big breach with where all the Target in the US. That was like the first breach. All the news stations in Milwaukee called me and said, hey, can you come on 5, 6, and 10 o'clock news? We do you. Yeah, oh, absolutely. Because they all knew who I was. And that, once you do that, man, that's like next level echelon stuff. And that's where, so I got national recognition for that. Bio channel got put on that, that documentary you talked about. I was on the Bio channel. I was on all that different stuff for that. And that's where you really start to take off. But if I wouldn't have consistently 3 years prior to that, or 4 years prior to that, none of it ever would have happened.
Right. Yeah. And people got to get over that social anxiety that kind of comes out with just reaching out and just.
And you think about all the
people, right? So.
You think about all the major, big leaders that we have in our life. I was actually looking on the internet this morning and some of the stuff with talking about Jeff Bezos, and they had his very first ad he had out for Unix programmers. He had like Unix, C and C++, and other programmers that they were trying to hire. That was him. All this public speaking show when Amazon first launched. You have to kind of almost be that mindset. You'll get him now. Obviously, he's a whole nother echelon from where we all sit. But you have to really be that person. And you see exactly what I'm doing now. And at no point are you above that. Right.
So generating leads through inbound and influencer marketing is one part of the story, but moving them through the sales funnel is a really different aspect. What are some of your favorite strategies to use when selling cybersecurity? And when you are selling a cybersecurity solution, what do you focus on most when you're talking to your prospects?
Yeah, so my part is, going back to a couple of things I talked about earlier. Number one, selling to the pain you solve, the pain points in their organization through an actual cybersecurity assessment. I recommend going to your existing clients, offering a free one. Upsell them naturally. It's easy. You're already doing services with them. It's kind of hard to, and that's also going to let you practice. It's going to help you build your own internal ammo. But then to working or new prospects, you have to make sure that you're finding pain with that assessment. Have a couple more golden nuggets here. If they have an IT staff or if they have an existing MSP, one of the things that you need to ask them is, when's the okay, we understand you have that, but when's the last time you actually had an independent third-party cybersecurity assessment? It's really easy to look at yourself from the inside out and say, oh, we're great, but when's the last time you looked at it? That's a really, really good way to walk in the door and get some people. And then moving them through the sales, you should have a dedicated sales process. Again, that's stuff that we teach inside of my coaching program is how to have a dedicated multi-step sales process. And it's got to be process and system-based. Can't be just winging it all the time. It's got to be that, because it's not only is it controllable in that scenario, but it's also scalable in that scenario. And if you're driving leads to your client, to your team, and they're processing them the right way, it becomes a numbers. Once it gets to a certain point, it's a numbers game, and it's just, okay, if we drive 40 leads in the pipeline this month, we're going to have 7 closes. Like, you can almost predict it, and that's where business gets really fun, because you know how many you're going to come out the bottom with.
Yeah, right. And so, as you know, cybersecurity as a whole, the entire industry shifts so quickly. So when a shift does occur, if the companies that need, companies need to adjust their strategies when a shift occurs, or they risk being left behind and exposed. And in order to stay up to date with these shifts, these companies need to invest a lot more money, usually. How can you sell cybersecurity to organizations whose biggest concern is budgeting?
Well, I think let's go back to that my child has cancer analogy. What's the budget for that? There's no budget. And is it ever planned? No. It's not one of those things that are planned for. So you have to make sure, number one, that you're planting the seed that there's issues. Every company, from a 2-user small little shop all the way up to the biggest, Department of Defense. The biggest breaches we're seeing are in the biggest companies right now, right? Because they're the lowest, they're the biggest targets to go after. So there's vulnerability across the board, but it's really important that you're selling and focusing on that pain you solve and making sure that they understand. People make financial decisions with emotion. Just like that my child has cancer analogy that I was talking about. That is an emotional decision. It's whatever it takes, we'll get it done, boom, now. And if you show enough pain during your assessment process, enough potential issues, that's where a product comes into play, really, really importantly, because it's showing a when do people have emotion tied to business? Financial related, right? It's usually that. So you have to really use the tools that you have part of your package and of your kit. And that's why I'm a huge fan of Etactics and some of your partner products, because it's showing the emotion it's creating emotion because it's showing numbers. And when people see, this is a real thing that would happen. You are a CPA and you're going to have, if you get this breach, you're going to have $225,000 of liability and outlying cost. And these things are going to be covered by insurance, and this isn't going to be, and you're going to have cash outlay of that. That changes mindsets, and that changes budgets. And what we have to do as an industry, what the MSSP industry has to do, is we have to change the mindset of IT as a convenience. We have to push them, and let's just relate it over to insurance. Is health insurance a convenience for any organization? Is business insurance a convenience? Do they need it? What's the ROI on it? Zero, until they have a problem. So there's no ROI on that. We are showing them now, we're at a point where cybersecurity and managed services and managed security services are to the point where we can show an ROI because we can prevent this, and it's going to happen. So you have to change the mindset of the people on the other side. You have to really, really change it, and that comes through process and systems and putting proper assessment pieces in place to show real numbers, which generate emotion, which can then lead to, we have to change our budget. That's where that comes into play. They have, some of these people have to change their budget. And, a great example of this is you think about all those cities that are getting breached and hacked, all the public institutions that are getting breached and hacked. Well, the biggest policy of those cities and that for the long time was, we're going to do an RFP. We're going to get a minimum of 3 quotes. And what do? They take the lowest one.
Right.
Because it fits in the budget. Well, that whole strategy is getting thrown out the window right now, because that whole thing is what's gotten them into the issue and the problem set that they're in right now. So we actually provided a public entities marketing campaign into our clients to directly go after them and say, are you doing your RFP process the traditional way? You're going to get hacked, period. If you're doing things based on money now, you're going to get hacked, and you're going to have a massive problem. And it's leading into marketing and lead generation opportunities. So that's a really long, drawn-out thing, but you see how important that is. That it's so critical that you start to you have to change behaviors of the end users in order to make things happen.
Awesome. Hey, Chris. Well, thanks for squeezing in some time today for the interview. And before we sign off, is there anything else you'd like to mention about or selling cybersecurity in general?
Sure. And, if you guys you heard me talk a lot about my coaching and various different things. We use Etactics as a part of that. We use various other products, but you see all the things that we talk about and the different mindset that we really have. This is a different world. We're very sales focused. Would love to have any of you, if you just, our URL for that is www.7figuremsp.com. Our goal is to help all of our clients add 7 figures to their businesses this year. So that's where that comes into. So 7figuremsp.com. You can just take a look at that.
Great. All right. Thank you, Chris. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Thanks, Matt.